Rwby is the greatest show of all time. The writing, animation, voice acting, and production are of such a high level of quality that it manages to transcend what human beings consider to be good or great, and reaches a level of absolute perfection. The series is occasionally called an anime by some viewers, but it is in fact not. The reason is not because the show originates from America and not Japan, but rather because, as my fellow high-level thinkers would know, all anime is trash while Rwby is not. One would require at least a quintuple major in filmmaking, animation, English, voice acting, and French toast baking to truly understand the quality of this series. The show manages to be a genius subversion of normal tropes in film and television production. For instance, the show frequently makes use of the narrative technique known as bad writing to subvert how most shows use the converse narrative technique of good writing. By using bad writing and inconsistent world building, the show manages to successfully establish itself as a unique and genius work of art from the writers at Rooster Teeth. The show weaves a genius production with incredible representation of all minorities. And as true intellectuals know, representation is required for anything to even approach the range of good. If a series or film lacks representation of literally every single minority in reality, it is what we call a dumpster fire, as coined by revolutionary Shakespearean director Rwby. The show represents homosexuals brilliantly through Ilya's entire motivation in life being a homosexual love for a heterosexual cat. Transsexuals are shown through Oscar's obvious and implied lack of testicles, and successfully the show represents people with mental disabilities, as shown through every action undertaken by series protagonist Ruby Rose. It represents people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder in a fashion so realistic that former sufferers may in fact experience a creeping unease when watching it. The show manages to both subvert and play straight the suffering of PTSD. Not only is it written with such quality as to be more akin to a pure transcription of the meaning of life as opposed to regular writing, but it almost completely takes place off-screen. The writers realized that they lacked the ability to portray PTSD, and as such not only did it perfectly, but put it off screen to ensure they did not offend any people suffering from the condition. By not portraying it on screen, the series leaves it up to the imagination of its fans how well it was portrayed. And as all fans of Rwby are clearly of the highest order of thinkers and in the same range of intelligence as L. Ron Hubbard, this means the PTSD was written flawlessly. The show also makes genius use of how its characters are inspired by classic fairy tales and works of literature. It expertly emphasizes how all fables and classic literature are actually stupid and senseless by writing characters inspired by the aforementioned works as if they physically lacked brains. As an example, the completely moronic acts of Ruby Rose both help to represent people born without common sense, but also represents how Little Red Riding Hood is an infinitely inferior and terribly written show that was clearly created by a talentless hack who didn't even speak Latin. Unlike the writers of Rwby, who all have degrees in quantum physics and understand how to speak, read, and write ancient Sumerian, Mandarin Chinese, and ancient Arabic. It is not hyperbole to state that if Rooster Teeth were so inclined, they could likely perfectly transcribe into English the Voynich's manuscript, but choose not to because that would make life far too easy for the lesser human beings that unfortunately make up a majority of mankind. The series' constant and blatant animation errors are a genius satire of how most anime feature frequent blunders. By including such obvious and egregious animation flaws, the show manages to blend expert resource management on the sides of the animators and flawless thematic references to how all anime is trash. The constant and frequent teleportation of characters on screen and what less intelligent people would consider general incompetence are clearly designed to be that way as to make the show even more brilliant than it already was. By making the characters overpowered to the point of being able to defeat any challenge the franchise throws at them, the writers ensure a complete lack of tension. That way the audience is not required to engage with the volume and thus don't feel tense or surprised, both emotions that elicit a negative response. If the show doesn't shock, scare, or leave the audience tense, it means their viewers won't ever have to feel concerned, which is a bad feeling that makes people unhappy, and being unhappy is bad. The show does manage to portray the oppression of the foreigners in a genius fashion. By never showing it on screen, it helps imply that the true oppression doesn't happen in obvious view of the audience. So the audience, which we've already established are the true geniuses of the future generation, get to decide themselves how well written it is. And obviously, if they get to choose how well written it is, then that means it was well written. Because nobody in their right mind would choose for it to be poorly written. The show also has a healthy collection of critics. I call them critics in air quotes so large, they've converted into waves of electromagnetic static and transported through my microphone into your subconscious. Because these people are actually people with mental disabilities, who are attempting to understand the true brilliance of this franchise. The Floof Artist is an example of these lesser life-form Rwby critics, who dares to imply a show like Utena is superior to Rwby, keeping in mind that Utena is a show so poorly made that unlike Rwby it contains vowels in its name. Another example is Fat Man Falling, a man so incompetent he named his channel after the most entertaining thing he's ever seen in person. And clearly if the most entertaining thing he's seen was a fat man descending, then he has not watched Rwby properly, as only the grandest of morons will not consider Rwby the greatest franchise they've ever seen. Don't watch his videos! His reviews might subconsciously and subliminally brainwash you into believing that Rwby is in fact not a flawed creation descended from the heavens to perfect human evolution and establish itself as the meaning of life. The Grimm are in actuality a genius thematic representation of Rwby critics themselves. The series before even airing knew for a fact there would be brain-dead primates slapping their monkey paws on keyboards, creating what they believe to be constructive criticism, while actually just being haters and toxic. By knowing beforehand how many species that deserve to be extinct there would be attempting to slander their hard work, they were able to brilliantly weave the Grimm into their storytelling, managing to both portray how dead their arguments are and useless their attacks are, by writing the Grimm as completely worthless beings that offer no danger to even a 14-year-old child. The fandom's alleged toxicity is in fact an intentional design choice by the show to assure anyone who pretends to be a fan by liking characters who are clearly despicable, intentionally lacking personality and motivations, and obviously bad people are treated like the horrible trash they are. It's made obvious that anyone who happens to like Cinderfall, Adam Taurus, or Salem are clearly bad people who deserve to come down with a bad case of death. However, the writing in this series is so unimaginably brilliant that these awful people are made so realistically unlikable that they are easy to relate to, and falling into the trap of liking them is too easy. This further turns the show into a genius representation of Christianity and other religions. The bad people, such as Hazel Reynard, represent sinful desire, and the difference between choosing to like them and knowing they are to be hated is akin to the choice of being sinful or being virtuous. Only the truest of fans will know which characters are actually going to become not bad men. Ilya, for example, is written with such unparalleled quality that it's clear to only us galaxial brain viewers that she was meant to be like from the start, as both the perfect representation of a homosexual whose entire personality is characterized by their sexual orientation and nothing else, as all homosexuals are in real life, and that she's meant to be a character beloved by trillions. The last bit is obviously because the creators know for a fact that Rwby will be continuing even when humanity reaches the point of having a population of at least 34.642 trillion. And then when that occurs, only the truest of Rwby fans will have been able to procreate, and thus form a utopian society of individuals who recognize the one true religion of Rwby. The tale of Team Rwby and their friends will become an epic story spanning multiple millennia of human existence to represent the gradual growth of humankind over quadrillions of generations. This is a truth that Rwby has brilliantly woven into the tapestry of their show, of which only the smartest of human beings will be able to decipher. We can only pray the utopian society where the only people who are segregated and oppressed are those who fail to recognize Rwby as the only item of worth ever created by any race in the entire multiverse. Finally, as a warning for those of you destined to hell, the show is good. You guys are just mean! But none of you Rwby critics is as bad as Nemesis Budreich! He's a fuck!